Cribble's innovation is its simplicity and its scale. Let me explain what that means. It's simple in the sense that it delivers immediate ROI. Customers get what it does right away and where it will fit. And it's scalable, which is its superpower. It allows for organizations for the first time ever to scale their data infrastructure in a manageable way.
At the foundation, the thing that really struck me about what makes Cribble so innovative is that they collect an enormous amount of data. They shape that data, they route it, they do it across infrastructure and security and applications. They can do it at a massive scale, and they can do it with low code or no code environments that, getting all of that to work is incredibly difficult.
Cribble really empowers organizations to route their data to whatever place is best to store it and whatever place is best to analyze it. That's the sort of freedom that people just haven't had with machine data or with observability in the past.
Investing is very personal. We see so many opportunities, and there are plenty of good ideas, great ideas. The team is brilliant, and to a person, people reminded me of that: customers, vendors, etc., competitors. And then I watched former colleagues join the company also, and it just gave it it gave it like the personal fabric that I felt like this was a group that I wanted to be in business for a really long time.
What convinced us to invest in Cribble was the right team, the right product at the right time, addressing the right market opportunity.
The team is really what got us most excited. I mean, in the end, as venture investors, we're investing in a group of people that we think have a chance to do something really disruptive. And when we had a chance to meet the founding team and the management team that they had built, we were convinced that this was a really special opportunity.
I think Cribble is going to be a new strategic layer in the data stack. It's as simple as that.
The process of getting into Cribble as an investor in 2021 was not for the faint of heart, which I interpret as, supply and demand. If more people want to be involved with the company than are allowed, it suggests to me that they're onto something.
We're honored to be partnering with the team at Cribble and are huge believers in the value that they can create for enterprise customers of all sizes, and we look forward to the journey ahead.
Cribble is one of the fastest growing companies we've ever seen in the enterprise space, so that growth alone was something that was really exciting to us.
At Sequoia, we like to say if data is the new oil, then Cribble is the new pipeline.
I believe Cribble has the opportunity to be one of the largest software companies of our generation. The market is enormous, the product works magically, and we're winning.
All right.
Hello. Welcome to the Cribble Logstream Deployment Architecture live from the basement. This is Ed Daly and Nick Hudecker, and we are excited to talk about options for deploying Logstream into any size enterprise environment. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Great. So whether it's the wintertime, not seeing the sun is okay right now, but one day I hope to escape.
That's one of the upsides of San Jose. It is sunny after a few days of overcast. We got some rain, which we desperately needed. So things are looking up here.
Very, very nice. That's awesome. It's going to be a great conversation today. I'm going to help companies get started with their Logstream deployments to be able to have the right foundation to, as they grow, to be able to grow with as little friction as possible, to spend time on getting value from the business, getting value from the data, and less time messing around with tools.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things that I really enjoy about Logstream is it just works. I use a lot of stuff. I get to play with a lot of different toys, and it's always a struggle. It's always a fight. So I'm excited to see what you're going to talk about today. So let's kick it off. Where are we going with our deployment architectures?
Yep. All right, so I'm going to go and share the deck. There we go.
All right.
All right, so
it's actually December now, Ed, right?
It's December.
Yeah,
wow.
Your title slide says it's November.
Yeah. You know what?
Let's get this year in the books, baby. We got.
it's just hard to know. I'm in the basement. I can't see out.
That's right. You don't see the sun. You have no idea.
So let's get started. Let's go with the intro. I think the coolest thing as a former, reformed, getting better Gartner analyst. How about you make the announcement?
Yeah. So, we mentioned this a few months ago. We got named as a cool vendor for monitoring and observability. And this is really great validation. We're making a huge impact for our customers on the observability side, whether it's security, if that's your main concern, if you are focused on IT operations, if you're a DevOps professional, we are really driving a tremendous amount of value with our customers. And it's great to see this recognition from arguably the leading analyst firm in the world today. Gartner is kind of the Godzilla of industry analysts. So it's great to see, we got named as a cool vendor. This is important recognition. And we're just going to continue building on this. We've had a number of awards, actually. We were AWS, ISV Rising Star of the Year, I think is the one.
That was really awesome considering the other options that were there. That's amazing.
Yeah, tough competition. So we've got that. We got the Intelligent Applications 40. I think those dropped actually on consecutive days right after reInvent, I believe. So things are going really well for us right now at Cribble. And frankly, I'm going to say it. If you're looking for your next opportunity, this is a great place to be. Whether you're stationed in a basement like Ed, or you're living in the sunshine in San Jose like I am, we're remote first, so you can certainly be anywhere. So check us out at cribble.io/jobs if you're looking for a new role, a new opportunity. We're a great team. We're incredibly modest, very good looking, and so it makes a lot of sense for us to keep growing the herd.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm in Atlanta. I mean, we're all over the country, people all over the world, and able to no commute here. We do have a nice. We have offsites. We do meet regularly together as a team, but just it's just without the friction. The question of going back to the office just isn't there.
Yeah, we've got we have engineers in Japan, we have engineers in Russia, South America. So yeah, definitely highly remote first.
So let's go ahead and talk. So what are the challenges that your security and operational observability teams are starting to run into?
Well, I think, you're nailing it here. Man, it's a lot of data. And it's not just like a lot of data from one place. It's a lot of data from all over. So it's not just, coming off of a firewall or a web application firewall or one or two agents. It's hundreds of these things. And Ed, you've seen more of this, I think, than I have in the wild, right? I mean,
so here's a great example. So, I mean, I go into a meeting with the upper leadership, and they tell everyone, all the architects, our costs could not grow beyond 10% year over year. And I raised my hand and I was like, our transaction volume is growing 50% year over year. Every single transaction from a customer generates 3 or 4 firewall events, 3 or 4 IDS events, 3 or 4 security events, 10 or 12 application events. It goes on and on and on. How am I supposed to manage a 10% year-over-year growth rate when our transaction rate, the thing that makes us money, is growing 50%? And
you have to make sense of all that data, right?
Yes.
Like you need to be able to link all of those things together, and that means frequently more than one destination platform, right? So you've got to, you still have to. There's got to be some intelligence here. It's not just about data growth, but like, what do you do with it, right? I think there's this. I used to see this a lot. People were like, "Oh, I just need the data." No, you need to make sense of it. One of my favorites was always, "I want to democratize my data." Well, a democracy requires an educated electorate, right? So you still need to be able to know, like, all right, what is my intent? What do I want to do here? And that's still, I think, in relatively short supply. I think in a lot of the tools that we're looking at today.
Right. And that's that first challenge. How do you get the data in? How do you manage it? How do you stay efficient? And then how do you reach observability? Yeah. Which we will save for another broadcast. One thing I want to mention about logging systems, capacity, it's unreal. You have retention requirements. If you're at any kind of regulated business, retention requirements are going up. PCI, you name it. Now with heightened government requirements around cybersecurity, there's even more requirements of what you need to do, how you need to maintain your data. It's becoming the cost of doing business. And so with these requirements, how do you maintain, like just what Nick said, how do you maintain efficiency? How do you get your data in? How do you not kill your team? And I think that's another huge thing we definitely want to talk about. And then how do you make sense of it? How do you achieve observability? How do you achieve insight? It's a monster challenge.
I think a lot of companies, like they say, "Oh, cloud's going to save me," right? I can easily move this stuff to the cloud. Cloud's going to make it worse, I think, in a lot of cases, right? Because your retention requirements, depending on what you're using, right? Like your retention requirements may bury your budget over time. And a lot of the models that we've seen, I think, and Ed, you can refute this if I'm wrong here. I think a lot of the models that we've seen, as people shift to the cloud, they penalize using the tool.
Right.
And so if you think that clouds, that the cloud model is going to save you, I don't think that's really the case in a lot of instances. People are still, right now it's kind of the honeymoon phase. But I think that was actually one of our trends from yesterday's webinar. Cloud costs are rising, I think, for a lot of companies, and they're going to be rebalancing, I think, a lot of those workloads.
Yeah, I think companies are originally said, okay, we're going to go cloud to save money, when they're finding out it's really a capability, and they have to treat cloud as a capability to rapid deployment and infrastructure as code, and not necessarily think about it as cost savings. But they are going to think about cost savings, that they need to look at other options, and also look at optimization. And that's where I think Cribble Logstream is uniquely positioned for both of those tasks.
It's funny. I always caution people against, silver bullet thinking, but then we talk about, what we do with an observability pipeline. In a lot of ways, it does become a silver bullet for a lot of these challenges.
Yeah, it's one of the few solutions where, when you talk about, the trite saying of having your cake and eating it too, you can have capabilities and manage your costs. It's one of the few places where you can genuinely do that.
Yeah.
That's why I want to bring up this about retention. This is something I had to deal with working at TransUnion for so long, was records teams, data governance teams, and also for every country. So we not only had enterprise requirements, we had requirements per country. And so it created enormous issues, a lot of meetings with lawyers, a lot of complexity. And it's as a business, especially a multinational business, those are things you have to have your arms around. I think increasingly you're seeing the CISO conversation of not necessarily just around security, but also data management, data integrity, almost a chief data officer like persona, but on the security side around risk, because the company's data is fundamentally, in many cases, its biggest asset.
And that's interesting, because this is something we've seen over the last year, right? Like data management was always somebody else's problem. It was for transactional data. You don't worry about governance there. But now it's, well, if I want to feed an AI ops platform, like, I need good data quality, I need good data format. If I want to, like you said, if you're in a multinational environment, you've got all kinds of regulatory rules that you need to comply with, and that's fundamentally governance. If you've got PII data, you need to redact. So, like, the data management concerns that used to be like somebody else's problem are now everybody's problem, especially in IT operations.
Yeah, I just want to bring into the concept of, so from a data area and a data governance, imagine you have a ransomware event. So while you're dealing with compromise, you're also talking about backups. And the idea is that with a quality data governance organization, you're going to know where to start first, that these 12 servers or this SAN is going to have this data on it. So we're going to take a risk-based approach and restore our most important things first. But if you don't know where your data is, you don't know where your PI is, you don't know have answers to these questions, then you just got to start at the first server and end at the last. And invariably, especially if you're behind me at the airport, you're going to be last. It's going to take a long time. The right data is going to be the last server you restore. And so that risk-based approach, that data governance approach, is more important than ever.
Yeah, agreed. All right.
Never get behind me at the airport, because you will be in the longest line. So, talk about some tool sprawl, and this is another issue. Security teams, operational teams, too many companies buy tools. We're tool vendors. We're telling you, we're describing the issues of not buying tools doesn't necessarily solve your problems. How do you link these tools together? How do you get value out of these tools? How do you maximize your value, get your capabilities, get your just efficiency? And get some efficiency. That's an enormous issue. Too many times you buy a tool, you have part of some guy's job. So 5 hours a week gets dedicated toward an enterprise tool that requires an enormous amount of knowledge. And then you have to ask why you're spending the money if you're not getting value out of your tools. And then finally, that integration aspect. Look at the security use cases of, I have my threat hunting aspect, I have my detection, I have my response, I have my SOC, I have my incident response. Typically, they're going to be some sort of different tool. How do you bind all these bits and pieces together in order to have them on the same page, using the same data to maximize the efficiency of your tool, of your organization?
Yeah, everybody wants like a single pane of glass. I think that's like this platonic ideal of like, yeah, man, it's going to be great. I'll have my observability glass. I'll have my monitoring glass over there. I'll have my security glass. And that just, perpetuates the problem. We just don't see this, like if you look at some of the tools up here, people build their careers around these things,
Yes.
and so if you think you're going to go in and be like, oh no, we're going to get rid of QRadar. No, you're not. You're just not, because it's already integrated into the processes. It's integrated into how the company basically functions. And so thinking you're going to replace that stuff is a fantasy in a lot of ways. And so if your CISO comes in, your CIO comes in, is like, hey man, we're going to cut back. We're going to go from 30 monitoring tools to 28. You're going to see significant resistance from your team, because that's how they work. And just, we're trying to figure out how to make them work better together.
Right. Absolutely. So let's have a quick over the data management. Increasingly, people want their same data in multiple places. Object store, so you can have it in S3, so you can use Athena against it. Numerous time series databases, your Elastic, your Splunks, your UBA tools, your SIM, your data lakehouse, your data warehouse. Every element of this can potentially be the same event, but in multiple different places. To typical platforms for managing this kind of data is we've seen customers do incredibly complex, hard to manage things in order to meet these requirements. And that's where Logstream makes just it takes the complexity away.
Yeah, agreed.
And then finally, choices usually means trade-offs. Costs, either if you're going to have great flexibility, visibility, you're going to bite it cost-wise, or you're going to take something's going to suffer. You rarely ever get the ability to manage costs, maximize your flexibility, and maximize your visibility.
Yeah, it's it's a good, fast or cheap pick two. I think it's more like pick one.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I remember when I first saw Logstream in 2018 from a Facebook ad somehow. But I was blown away that we could finally have choice that didn't take an enormous amount of effort. As we close out kind of the problem, you look at observability tool sprawl, you can see the spaghetti monster of getting data from the left to the right, how to do it, how to manage it. I think is something we were talking about before, Nick, about the strategic issues around IT right now. So much of it is I can't get what I need done because I don't have the people to get it done. And we have to change, as tool vendors, we have to change the traditional thinking of, if I have to bring a tool in, I have to have 1.2 full FTEs in order to support it. How do we have tool selections that's going to reduce your overall need for business as usual functions, so that you can redeploy your engineering resources to do valuable things instead of just managing the spaghetti monster that is data right now.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, that's the thing. Like, nobody can hire, right? You just can't hire fast enough to meet the needs. So you need these force multipliers from the tooling side. Yeah, agreed.
I think it's so important, that strategic aspect. As we talk to VPs, directors, that's the common issue. And so how do we put in processes and have tools? And this is where I think from a Logstream perspective, you have a rich, easy to use UI that makes things simple. I think the best word is approachable.
Yeah. Even me on the marketing side, I can figure it out.
Yeah,
which is quite a statement, right? Which is quite a statement.
Here we go. Tell me, Nick, tell me about what's the concept of observability? How is that a big idea? Why does it matter?
There's as many definitions of observability as there are vendors in the space. And we're seeing this word get muddied a lot, right? Everybody's an observability company today. I think you have to kind of go back to the first principle of, what is observability? Observability is the capacity for an application or a piece of infrastructure to be seen, right? For its internal state to be determined from its external outputs. And so, like, why do we need that? Well, look at new applications, right? New application architectures, you're talking about microservices, so a given application might consist of dozens or hundreds of independently developed services. They may use the same technology stack. They may be different technology stacks. And monitoring stories weren't really designed for that kind of complexity. And so do container-based deployment. Containers rarely last longer than 24 to 48 hours. By the time you realize there's a problem, the container's gone. And so you have to think about how do I better cope with this increasing complexity. So you really do need to think about, I need to collect all of the data. I need to be able to use it how I see fit, not how my tool vendor sees fit, and then be able to ask questions over that. And so what shape does that data need to take? What kind of optimizations do I need to make over that data? So all of this becomes a very data-centric story. I mean, that's my view on it, right? I think it's,
I think it's well said.
Yeah, thanks.
It's well said. I think and so much of, and this is where I kind of I'm troubled by the vendor talk of observability when they don't talk about the foundational needs of how do you have the foundation to support observability. You need the ability. You need the ability to you need the ability to consume good data, relevant data. Your tools have to be able to do that. You have to be able to get your data to the right tools in the first place. All those foundational aspects before observability even comes into play, and these are all just incredibly important. And that's why it's just that where we give you that foundation of being able to get value from observability.
Yeah. Let's get to it. Like, let's talk about our architectures here. Here we go. Look at that.
There we go. So, and that's where Logstream is sitting in the middle between your sources and your destinations. It gives you control. It controls the data plane, and it gives you a straight through process of managing your data with code to get to your destinations. You can get your data to the right tool in the right format, and with complete control and visibility.
Yeah. And basically, operators want this thing over here to work with that thing over there. And why can't that happen? Well,
and as easy as possible.
Yeah. And exactly. How do I make it happen as easily as possible? Great side point there. And that's where, frankly, that's where we come in. Right. And, we keep dunking on vendors. We're a vendor.
Right.
But, we're really customer centric on this. Like we've all been here, and we want to help advance this story for the people that have to do these really challenging jobs.
I remember when we the first time we ever talked, you brought up the idea of Switzerland, that we want anyone to talk to anyone. The idea that to serve the needs of our customers instead of ourselves. I think one of the long-standing concepts with vendors is that we're going to create an ecosystem where only the stuff in our lake can talk to each other. We want to be able to bridge those lakes so that the data, the tools that you need to work together will work together easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no like one size fits all architecture here, right? Like everybody is different. Every company has different priorities, different concerns, different deployment footprints. And so you've got to adapt to that. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
So
let's get to it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some small deployments, initial deployments. So let's talk about some of the fundamental concepts with Logstream. And also just from a general, I put my enterprise architect hat on. It's something that's hard for me to not talk about.
You can't help but do this, right? I think like you've got these hanging on the walls of your house.
Yes, they are. My wife doesn't like them. It's right next to the dogs playing poker.
There we go. There we go. Nothing but high class at the Bailey household.
That's right. Well, that's why that's why I'm in the basement.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's one thing as you get married, you gradually learn that your stuff is dumb or stupid, and that you just have to live with it.
And you get relegated to the basement.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about even from a small deployment with Logstream. Logstream introduces the concept of worker groups. The worker groups are the actual Logstream tooling that sits on your server as either software or as a container that then consumes data, does something to the data based upon the rules that you give it, and then ships that data somewhere. Very, very flexible, essentially a stateless architecture where you are using the leader. It's the nice teal tile that I have right here. You interact with the leader. You create your code. You test your code. You push it down to the workers, and the workers do all the work. Some things to think about in terms of how your worker groups are structured. So initially, even for a small deployment, I'd always have 2 workers in every worker group. I'd have a load balancer for each worker group, and then also separate your workflows. And that's why I label this agent data collection and agentless data collection. You have fundamentally different types of workloads that are involved with these two work groups. That's why I want to split them up. Prepare yourself for failure. Anytime you have a deployment, start thinking about when stuff starts breaking, what's going to happen. And by splitting this up, you can somewhat lower your risk and give yourself more options. So
Ed,
start
go into
sure.
What you mean by agent versus agentless, right?
So let's talk about
I think of it as like push versus pull.
There you go. So push from your log shipper. So you have your Splunk Universal Forwarder, you have your Logstash, your Splunk Heavy Forwarder, you have your various Beats implementations, your Elastic Agent, your Fluentd. It goes on and on and on. And so for most of these agents, you're going to have a capacity of load balancing. And so inside the agent, you can say, here's the 3 IPs of my my worker group, and it's going to load balance. One server goes down, it's going to fail over by itself. It's going to have an even flow of data, typically going to have an even flow of data, and it's going to have the capacity to heal. Agentless goes back to syslog is going to be an example. HTTP log delivery using, say, a Splunk HEC protocol is a good example. HTTPS delivery, also syslog, also API type data that you're pulling into your worker group. These are all going to have very choppy responses. You're not going to have the ability to fail over, and that's why you have to have a load balancer. So all the data going into your agentless data collection goes through a load balancer. You don't want to put yourself in a position, even with a small deployment, of saying, I'm going to have one server in my worker group because it's really small and I don't need it. But to me, you always want to plan. So even if it's just one server in your worker group, still have the load balancer in place, because if you do need to expand, in almost every case you will, instead of having to reprogram all your endpoints to then go use a load balancer is already there. And so your work to expand your capacity is simply adding another worker to your load balancer pool. Just simplification, and just put yourself in a position to grow. Because I think that's one thing with it's data and storage, you're going to grow. It's going to be the rare organization that doesn't have significant growth.
Yeah, if your data volumes are not growing, your business is failing. Like that's all there is to it. Yeah. I would have conversations with people like, when am I going to be done with my data management initiative? When you go out of business, like you're always going to be growing. You're always going to be modifying. So you want to optimize for the common case, but you want to make sure you can handle the outliers as well. And that's where we're getting started here with this small deployment. So like my takeaways here, right? Separate your worker groups depending on what kind of collection model you're following, push versus pull. Front things with a load balancer, and note that our worker groups are effectively stateless. So there's no overhead from maintaining the state of what's been processed, which node processed it, and so on. But Ed, when I talk about stateless architectures, the natural question is always like, well, what about data loss, right? It's a realistic concern, but maybe you could talk about that. Like, this is something that we get this question pretty regularly, and we answer it. But go into that a little bit, right? We talk, stateless makes people a little scared at times.
Right, and this also goes back to my initial point of planning for failure. This is also why I'm a big fan of using log shippers. Log shippers are going to have a certain amount of more robustness on your endpoints to deliver logging. So for example, the Beats or Splunk Universal Forwarder are going to be on your servers. They're going to be looking at your log files, and they all have the ability. So if your endpoints go down, they're going to queue. When your endpoints come back up, they'll start sending your data again. And so the idea is it's not this forget, we're going to just fire data across the network and just hope it gets there. It's going to give you a more robust way to deliver data. As in contrasting to your agentless data collection, even though agentless data collection is fun and it makes certain other things easier, but it does put risk in terms of data loss. Syslog is a prime example. In our previous live broadcast, we discussed scaling syslog. Syslog, UDP syslog is the devil. That's all there is, and it is data that's fired across the network, and it has no state, it has no checking. It's just data. Hope it gets there. Good luck. And too many times you'll get where you don't have the load balancer infrastructure in place. Your network starts dropping data. From an architecture standpoint, you're trying to fire UDP data across 3 firewalls, and your firewalls are dropping the data. And it's very, very, very difficult to know it. It's going to organizations. It's not unusual to see 50% data loss with UDP, and people simply just don't know it, and it creates massive blind spots. And so this is why, so in this, I think we're going to talk about this again, is that you want to be able to structure your UDP logging in such a way that your logging you're putting your logging destinations for UDP syslog as close to the sources as possible, so you're not risking data loss. And you also make sure you have scale, and this is where the load balancers come into place.
Actually, if you want to know more about scaling syslog and dealing with UDP, you can check our previous video, or our previous live stream, if you're on YouTube, where we've already talked about this in pretty great length. So definitely check that out if you want to know more, and you can reach out to me or Ed on Twitter. We'll leave our handles later on. Yeah. So yeah, we've talked about that a little bit. We can definitely go into it in more detail.
So let's go into so another is HTTP or Splunk heck delivery. The idea that I'm going to deliver my events over an HTTPS put, which is great. It works really well, high speed, can be very, very efficient. But again, you run into issues. Got to have a load balancer in place, even if it's a small amount of data. You want to have a load balancer in place, so that way, when your server does fail, and it will fail, that you fail over to something else. And so you've got to position yourself for that, or you're just going to lose data. It's just what it is. Now, finally, you have to monitor your systems. You have to monitor your servers. If you run out of memory or run out of CPU on your servers, your operating system is going to start killing things. And if it kills a logstream worker, in order to recover memory or recover CPU to operate, you do have the potential for data loss. And so Logstream does offer very good monitoring solutions, but it's just something that you have to watch your provisioning and make sure that you're not operating on the edge. If you have an 8-core server and you're constantly running at a 1 minute load average of 8, and you need more CPU, you put yourself at risk doing this. And you monitor your memory. You run out of memory, Linux is going to start killing things in order to keep itself alive. It's just what it is. So it's real important to do that. But again,
so in your experience, Ed, are worker groups typically CPU bound or memory bound?
Typically very CPU bound. And that's where, and that's why I've made the point about you've got to closely watch your memory and make sure your CPU utilization, and make sure you're not on the edge. Keep in mind, so Node.js is the fundamental foundation for Logstream. It moves data very efficiently.
Yeah.
Where you start seeing utilization is when you're starting to transform your data, when you're starting to pull regexes. That's when, the more you do it, and this is something you'll see with everyone, as you start using Logstream, you start figuring out all the amazing things I can do to my data. And the more amazing things you do to your data, the more CPU you're going to eat up. So it's something you got to keep a close eye on, and don't operate on the edge. You want to give yourself 25 to 50% of overhead, free overhead, in order to operate safely.
Yeah, because and that's because as your volumes might spike, you want that excess capacity in there.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about capacity limitations, but we don't really see these very often. We're typically a bump in the wire.
Yeah, typically, but you've got to be careful. Always size your environment for your spikes. This is something I get in a significant fights with the capacity team. They would tell me that, well, your average utilization is this, and then I would talk about the outage that we had last month, where the utilization went to 900%.
Yeah,
you got it. You talk the way I characterize it to my business leaders was, what's the highest level the business is willing to assume in terms of when this is going to fail. So if we're going to go to 900% capacity once a month, is that okay? I mean, is it 500% capacity? But you got to make decisions about where you're willing for your monitoring and security systems to fail. And typically, you ask the security team, they don't want it to fail ever. But you got to prepare. You don't want to wait till things go bad.
Right. All right. That's the small deployment. All right.
So now I wanted to bring out with the idea of a medium deployment, where you're scaling out your worker groups to handle other types of data. One thing that can be very popular is the idea that I'm going to have a worker group that's dedicated to processing some sort of sensitive data, GDPR, PII, PCI, take your pick. But the idea is that I can have clear separation between my data types. And think of it as a boundary, from your worker group. So, previously we described agent and agentless as a workload boundary. Now we're going to talk about a data sensitivity boundary, or think about maybe some sort of security data that no one else can see. And because this is how the Logstream RBAC works, is that you could assign users a team. So say you have an operations team that's not authorized to see PII, you can give them access to your agent based on your agent list, but the PII data can only be accessed by another group. And so just keep those things in mind in terms of role-based access. Also, another example, you have another data center. So you have a Logstream worker that's there. You have a business unit that's not necessarily supported by your team. So you can have a Logstream worker in the business unit data center and only give that business unit access to that worker group.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Does it resonate in terms of breaking up your data?
It's very clear. So you start out with, let's partition based on how we're collecting data, right? Is it getting pushed to us? Or are we going to get it? And then it becomes more of, well, all right, now we're talking about let's partition based on who needs to see it. And so you could have, if you've got push and pull worker groups, you could then have sensitive data push and pull worker groups where you limit who has access to that. No, that very clear, very clear.
And this also goes into the observability maturity lifecycle. As you mature, as you get more expertise, as you grow, you'll start finding new use cases. Sensitive data separation, sensitive data management is very, very, very common. Being able to break it up by business unit. And this is something that we'll talk about in a future broadcast, is as you invest in a GitOps workflow, your ability to maintain your code agent, worker group by worker group starts to expand as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense as well. Good stuff.
All right, so let's look at a large deployment. So this is one of the things that I've invested a lot of time in, and this is something that we did at TransUnion was we use front end worker groups to then funnel data back to what we call a core processing, or as I refer to here, a processor worker group. The idea was we would have routing and tagging on these front end groups that were relatively small. So typically they're VMs. We were just passing data through, and where we concentrated our transformation on one worker group that had the biggest servers. So for example, in these remote sites, or what we call our front end servers, we would have typically 8 core servers. There would be 4 or 5 8-core servers behind a load balancer, and they would just be essentially passing through data. They would be tagging data, which is relatively low utilization and is relatively simple. And then we would funnel that data back to our core processing worker group. And so instead of having 8 core VMs, this would have 72 physical core servers. And so we had 10 of those. We'd have 700 cores in order for a couple of roles, is that we would be concentrating our processing. And so we would put our CPU where we needed it the most. And also just from a simplicity standpoint, because when you're transforming data, it's easy for it to get lost. If I put one, say, transform for Windows data on one worker group, you got to remember to maintain it for all the others. It's easier now with packs, but you still have to do updates. You still have to keep track of it. And this is something that's important as you invest in Logstream, is that you're investing in a development platform. So you want to start thinking about development standards, where you make changes, how you do it, and do it and this is something for another broadcast. Investing in consistency, because as you scale this out to the rest of your team, you want to be easily understood that we do this. This is what we do here. This is what we do in our other worker groups. Is that resonating, Nick, in terms of just
it does, and I want to so 700 physical cores. Okay, that's a pretty big number. Yes. What kind of data volumes are we talking about here? I mean, this is not for the faint of heart.
No, not at all. And so we were not. So in organizations, we had 11 terabytes at peak flowing through that, in a day, and up to 300. I think we get 300-400 gigs an hour. And I'm sorry, not not a lot. Well, actually, way more than that. We would up to a terabyte an hour at peak. And so the reason why that was there is, though, we made significant transformations in data. Had a lot of Windows data that we turned into beautiful data with
very chatty protocol.
But when you're taking craptastic XML logging and turning it into key value pair, that is you're taking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of events per minute. You're deserializing all this XML, you're breaking it up, you're cutting out the white spaces, cutting out the brackets, and creating a key value pair. And you're doing it with almost no detectable latency.
Yeah.
And so that's just the Windows logs. So think about from the ASA logs, the firewall logs, the security logs, where you're doing the same thing. And the idea is that we need it to scale. And so that 700 cores was the idea that we want 50% headroom, because we can't have latency, and we can't have this thing fall over when we need it the most. And so, I mean, did it probably put a little bit too much to it? You know, it did, but we had to make the decision of we've got to protect our data processing. And
you've got to be able to handle peak load. I mean, I think,
exactly.
The key lesson here, I think, is, regardless of the size of your deployment, you need to do some level of specialization around what you're prioritizing, right? So you're either specializing based on how you're getting data, you're specializing on who can access that data, or you're specializing on where you want to optimize your processing across all of those things. And this is a great way to think about how you want to mature your observability pipeline deployment.
And that's why it's so important that we think about this in order to provide options, and so that when someone does adopt Logstream, that they can put themselves. That's why every conversation I'm on is like, you got to have a load balancer. Well, I don't need a load balancer. My response.
No,
is,
you need one.
Will.
Yeah,
you will. So even if it's one server and one data center, you still want to put it behind the load balancer. I remember we talked to one potential prospect who had 400 or 500 endpoints in a data center. They didn't have any load balancers, and I just stressed you really want to get one, because when you do need to grow, you're then going to have your network and your operations teams reprogram all these hundreds of endpoints in order to point instead of the server at the load balancer. So do this to begin with, and minimize your change.
Yeah. Plan for the future, and then you can make smarter choices today.
I think that's by far the best way to see it. Another thing I want to point out for the large deployment was we had a Logstream deployment in every single country, as the idea that it's the pivot point for the data that's coming into the country, how it's handled, and where it goes. And so certain data that had to stay in the country would stay in the country. Other data that was security oriented would be depersonalized and shipped back to the security data lake. And that was the idea. And because we had an easy to use UI, we could keep track and visualize everything that was going on in every country and monitor it. And that's why that easy to use UI is so important. There's some other tools that are fairly capable, but they're all CLI based, and trying to understand, trying to visualize, was very, very, very difficult. I couldn't imagine trying to do it especially in a large, global deployment.
Yeah. No, I think this is great insight for people that are thinking about, well, what does this look like when I start? What things do I need to keep in mind, and so on? No, it's fantastic content. Great stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's the way to look at it, is my starting point versus this. And by investing a little bit of thought, you can make things so much easier for yourself long term.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go into, go a little bit more of the closing. Let's just kind of tie it all together. What does Logstream give you? Flexibility, simplify, and control. And so what do you think of those first, this big overall themes? Does that resonate with you, Nick?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, everybody's job is hard enough. And I think that people are looking for, an approachable way to deal with this mountain of log data, right? Whether you're dealing with 11 terabytes a day or you're dealing with a petabyte a day. That is a staggering amount of data to deal with in multiple formats. I look at Windows XML logs, and you kind of gag a little bit because they're atrocious. Or you're thinking about cost optimization, right? Like half of the events I'm consuming off of some devices may not be relevant. So what's the best way? What's the most flexible way for me to be able to control that stuff? And in a lot of these systems, we're freeing up a lot of headspace. So if there are more data sources you want to bring in, you now have the room to do that. And this is where we talk about, you can observe more, right? The data that you're actually consuming, like whether you're converting XML log or Windows XML logs into key value pairs or whatever, you're trimming that down. You're saving quite a bit of volume. And so you can put more things into these destination systems so you can observe more. And also you're really optimizing your spend quite a bit. I think that's something that people like, they realize, there are both sides of the coin here. which is remarkable when you kind of see that light bulb click on when you're talking with a new prospect.
It's a great way to put it. The scale is just, I remember when I got my first Splunk license, it was either 2000 or late 2007, early 2008. And I thought I was just like, wow, we're going to log an entire gig of data per day. And I remember having it fall over because we went to 5 gigs and it was a 32-bit system and it stopped working. And now the idea that to consume 20, because when I went left, we're consuming 20 T a day. And it was
staggering.
It's staggering. It's just, I'm still just blown away.
Yeah. And that number is just going to go up. Like, that's it.
Right.
And that's the way of the world. Being able to decide what's valuable, what's not, how you want to cope with all that, how you want to cope with regulatory concerns. These are all real business problems that can be difficult to grapple with when you're talking about huge data volumes.
I think it's either you take control of your data or it's going to take control of you. I mean, there's just no other way about it. Otherwise, you're going to have companies that you're making the choices of, okay, I'm going to pay an enormous amount in software and hardware costs, or I'm going to optimize, or I'm just not going to log things and I'm going to accept the risk of vulnerabilities, of not being able to understand my applications, of not being able to understand my security. Those are tough choices for any company. And I think the optimization standpoint, to have control, to have the ability to optimize, is by far the best answer.
And just before we wrap up here, like the security story, right? Like, that's a board level concern now, right? Yes. Everybody's concerned about ransomware. Everybody's concerned about privacy violations, including regulators. Like, you've got to get in front of this.
Yes.
All right, Ed, wrap us up.
All right. So, hey, want to see more for yourself? Try the Cribble sandboxes. This is one of the best things. I've never seen this anywhere else, where you have the ability to go to sandbox.cribble.io, have the ability to pick a course. It's going to spin up an instance of Logstream for you and walk you through how to use it. You can go hands-on with no effort, with no installs. You can't beat it. If you want to go the next best, go sign up for a free account at Logstream Cloud at cribble.cloud. And then you can actually point your tools at Cribble Cloud and see it for yourself.
And the best part about both of these, you don't have to talk to anybody, right? There's no request a demo button on our website. We have these two options for you, and they're fantastic. Highly recommended.
Makes things easy. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. It's really great to talk about these things. I think that this is going to be just something that could. I think this is just. As people get used to using log streams, understand it just solve so many problems.
Yeah.
I'm going to hang out in the chat window for a little bit. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and use it in the various systems. Go ahead and we'll answer your questions. My Twitter handle is ebailey1367. Nick, what's yours?
N Hudecker, NHEU, D as in David, ECKER. We're both pretty easy to find.
Yep.
Also, by the way, you can see the URL at the bottom of the screen. We've got a really great user community, by the way. Our colleague Rachel, our Pi, runs that. We're coming up on, I think, 3,000 people in our community. Very vibrant. You can come in there and just hang out with us. You can get help with the product. You can ask questions. Always happy to help. And you're talking to the people that built it. So not a lot of companies are like that today. Very community focused, very community centric. And we have a user group next week, Tuesday. I don't know what we'll be talking about yet, but we've got an EMEA user group, and we have one in the US as well. So if you're interested in getting involved, sign up at cribble.io/community.
That's great. So let us know if you have any questions. Love to talk. Nick, thank you for your time. I think we had a great conversation. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I look forward to the next one.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.